Hey, everybody, welcome to the Sideline Report. I'm Marvin Jackson, along with Lou Holder. But we also have a special guest with us. She's a national person, and she's with CBS Sports, and you can see her on Sundays. AJ Ross, thank you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you both.
Yeah.
Hey, Marvin, look, I've been trying to get AJ for a long time. You know how special this is for us, brother. I mean, I've been trying to get AJ for a minute. Howard University product. She spent time in the Washington, D.C. area, blown up. Now she's national, doing us proud. AJ, thanks so much for taking some time.
No, thank you again for having me. I'm sorry to keep me busy, but it's a good thing.
That's right. And she also wears our same colors, right, Lou?
That's right. That's right.
Delta Sigma Theta.
It's catalytic love right here.
That's right. All right. Well, AJ, tell us a little bit about, what you do now. Where were you this past weekend? Because you're somewhere different every Sunday, right?
Every Sunday.
As you asked me, I had to think because it kind of blends into each other. But I was just in Cincinnati covering the 49ers and Bengals game that went into overtime yesterday. And that game was so crazy. It had a little bit of everything from muff punts to, I think, a combined 9 sacks. Both quarterbacks, being clutch down the stretch. It really was down to the wire and who would win that one. And the Niners came out on top. So had a really good time covering that.
That's right. And we know a little bit about Kyle Shanahan. He used to coach here. He was an offensive coordinator for his dad. So kudos to his victory up there in Cincinnati.
I was going to say it runs in the family,
right? Yeah.
So AJ, what's it like, going from city to city, covering these games? You get an assignment, you got to do your quick deep dive. And then once that game's over, you got a short memory, you got to put it away and you got to do it all over again. What's it like being on these sidelines every single week in all those conditions, seeing the best of the NFL?
Well, it's a privilege and it's so much fun. I got to say off top, I never knew as a fan, the vantage point that you get on the sideline, how much faster the game is when you're actually there and the sheer contact. It's just an adrenaline rush, actually physically being there on those sidelines. But as far as preparation, I also think as a fan, a lot of people maybe assume it's just, it's a easy gig. You ask a couple questions ahead of the game, halftime, post game, and that's about it. But there is so much work that leads up to each of these games. Today is kind of an off day, travel reset day for me, but tomorrow I nose in the book between Tuesday all the way through Sunday. Sunday's the fun part because you get to, showcase all that you've studied throughout the week, but it's really a collaborative effort. And we get not only the media guides from each team, but I take a lot of pride in trying to find specific storylines that have not been told before that maybe, reflect some more about these individuals off the field, as well as their talents on the field. And it's an array of going into their social media, going into local newspapers, local podcasts, trying to find alternative means like their agents, getting some sort of inside information that people haven't heard before that will, tie into game storylines, of course, but add some depth. And you're not just saying the obvious each game. So even if I'm not necessarily saying it, I work with Greg Gumbel, Adam Archuleta, and we're always communicating throughout, timeouts or commercial breaks. So I might relay something that they say on air and it's fine. I don't need to get credit for it. People aren't tuning in to hear me all the time, but as long as it, makes the entire broadcast better, that's the point.
You played sports at one time. So here you are doing sports, but you also did news, right?
I did. Yeah, I did news for a really long time. I was told, coming out of school, and not to discourage younger people in doing the same thing, but, I started at ESPN behind the scenes out of Howard. They weren't going to put a, fresh college graduate as the anchor of Sports Center. So I left Bristol and started getting on air experience in smaller news markets, one-man banding, carrying my own camera, writing, shooting, editing, all that good stuff. And I climbed different markets and I was with ABC News in New York before I started freelancing for CBS on the weekends, CBS Sports. And, it came to a head for me that news had its own demands. work-life balance demands, and it can be very stressful and emotionally draining. Whereas sports, it's not life and death typically. It's, you win, you lose. There's a lot of inspirational stories. And for me, that resonated so much more.
We're so proud of you because of the journey that you've taken. But as a woman of color, being on these sidelines, we see Pam Oliver and before that, so many others have paved the way. When you look at it and find out that people are actually, you're carrying the mantle for so many as a woman, as a minority, as a person of color. What does that mean to you every time you get behind the mic, knowing that, it's not just you're representing so many people that look like you, that have a desire to learn the right way on how to get into this business, do this business, and do it admirably?
It's a great responsibility. And like I said before, it is a privilege. There's not that many Black women, even now, when you look across the league that cover the NFL. There's myself, there's Christina Pink, Lisa Salters, and Pam. I think that's about it. Maria Taylor as well for NBC. So there's now some more, but it's still, when you look across the board, there's not that many. And to know all the sacrifices that have been made just to open doors for us, it means that much more that we have to continue, of course, reaching back and pulling forward. But it goes back to even what I was saying before, like I am so meticulous in everything that I do with my preparation, and I strive for, excellence, that being the standard. So I'm not letting those that came before me down, and also, relaying to those that come behind me, like, you can't just be good, you got to be great.
Yeah. Yeah. And you talk about being meticulous. Any other tools? This is kind of a Bible study that we're having on the show too. Any other tools that you would give, broadcasters, male or female, things that you've used that have helped you now as you sustain and move up in the ranks? What kind of tools did you use besides being meticulous? What are some of those things that AJ Ross has in her kit to be successful?
I am a journalist at the core. There's no cheating the process, and journalism at its core is writing. So even though I have this news background, whatever background you may have, being a good writer and a good writer for broadcast, those skills transition in whatever facet you may pursue, sports or any other, path. So I know my writing and being able to, adapt on the fly. Interviewing is an art in and of itself. You're not just, asking normal, regular questions. You're trying to connect with someone and extract a certain reaction from them. And also think of it from the vantage point of a fan. Like, what would the fans want to know at this or this juncture? So if you don't cheat the process, and those details in writing and the art of interviewing, I think you can go very far.
You're doing all of this in the middle of a pandemic. What have been the challenges there for you?
Well, last season was entirely different than this one because we were so far removed from the coaches, the players. There were no fans. It was like you were going to these games in a vacuum. It was a very weird ambiance and atmosphere. This year, I think there has been a shift in just, everybody's just excited to be connected again. Yes, there's still some distancing, but I think the teams, especially their communications departments, their PR departments, have been bending over backwards to, find alternative means, whether it's Zoom or, sidebar phone calls. We could still watch practices ahead of the games to just give us, the access that we could not literally have last year. And to just, again, add to the broadcast and make it better than it has been before.
AJ gets to see so many teams, especially AFC, since she's on CBS. Talk about some of the games that were big games so far for you, and some of the players that you've covered so far these last couple of years.
Well, again, the game I covered yesterday was pretty big for the Bengals. It looked like they were on the precipice of winning a big one against the Niners, but I've also had the Ravens a few times this year. And one of the games that we thought was going to be a huge game was the Ravens-Chargers game, which ended up being a pretty lopsided victory for the Ravens at home. Ironically, I've had 2 Chargers games, and they were the worst 2 games for Justin Herbert this year. So it's an anomaly, and maybe we're a jinx. We've been kind of joking that Brandon Staley doesn't want to see our crew again this year. But I am a believer in Justin Herbert, and I think he is an anomaly as far as the second year quarterbacks and even what he was able to do as rookie of the year last year. That's just not normal. So I know you want to probably ask me about some AFC predictions leading into this playoff hunt. And I would actually lean more towards a Justin Herbert than I would a Mac Jones, because I just don't see Mac being experienced enough down the stretch, obviously. And also, the Patriots defense, of course, has been exceptional this year, but I just, even despite their record right now, I'm not going to go with the, bandwagon, I guess, and saying that the Patriots will be in the AFC Championship. I'm leaning more towards the Chargers. I would have said the Ravens earlier this season, but with Lamar getting hurt and they just also have so many challenges offensively, I don't see them, necessarily being in the championship game. But a dark horse, if you will, as far as records, I'm a believer in the Colts because of Jonathan Taylor and the year that he has had. And I think they have not lost this year as long as he has had 100 yards on the ground. And I just had the Colts game 2 weeks ago against the Texans. Granted, the Texans are not a good barometer for most teams at this point in the season, but the Colts, especially with Carson Wentz and the trajectory of his career under Frank Reich this year, I think they have something special going. Their pass rush is pretty solid this year. So if I had to pick 3 teams out of the AFC or even just 2, I would go with the Colts and the Chargers being my top 2.
So when you mentioned those teams, you mentioned Carson Wentz, you mentioned you were just in Cincinnati with Burrows, you mentioned Justin Herbert, you mentioned Lamar. Jumping out of the AFC just for a tad, this quarterback position is so premium in the NFL. You've seen it up close and personal. Here in the Washington area, what is the national perspective and then your perspective of seeing all these quarterbacks? Taylor Heineke, he's had flashes in the pan where he's been really, really good, but then he's, been not so good. The quarterback position is of a premium. Your overall thoughts on what you see from Taylor Heineke and a quarterback in general?
Well, I'll answer one of your latter questions first, in that a lot of teams after this season are going to be desperate for a quarterback. And as the national conversation has gone thus far, this is not a strong draft class, this upcoming 2022. There's a lot of twos there. So I would not be surprised, especially since, correct me if I'm wrong, Rivera was looking at Matthew Stafford before he went to the Rams. Like, they're not averse to, especially with Fitz, having a veteran guy, somebody with experience versus like going straight to the draft. And I think some speculation has been with the Ole Miss quarterback, Matt Corral, who has kind of similar potential or a similar skill set to Taylor Heineke. But also Taylor, if you look at the expanse of his career, he's only started 13 games. He's played in 21. He's only started 13. That's as many as Mac Jones, if you want to, do a comparison. So to even say what he is capable of, I think is a little premature. So if they wanted to give him some more space, some more opportunity to see how that may pan out, I think that's fair. And also consistency is key. That's something else Rivera has, at least vocalized, an ideal quarterback for the Washington football team going forward. I believe his completion rate was over 70% for that 4-game stretch leading through the Raiders win. And that was the most of any Washington quarterback since 1950. So, he has these flashes where if he can remain consistent, there's a lot of potential there. And having Fitz as a backup, I think, they would not be setting themselves up next year if they stayed committed to Heineke, at least for one more year, until there's a more solid draft class. And when you look at the market, there's speculation that Garoppolo could be available or Derek Carr. I don't know if those guys would want to come to Washington of all the available places. So there's going to be a lot of teams that are vying for veteran guys. I don't think Washington is out of the realm of, right or wrong, if you want to call it that, and staying committed to who they have.
What about a Russell Wilson or a Matt Ryan? Do you see that kind of in the mix? Because I am total agreement with you is that the veteran quarterback is something that Ron Rivera wants, because I don't think he's totally sold on the whole Taylor Heineke thing. So what about names like Russell Wilson, who might be in the last year of his deal, or Matt Ryan coming out of Atlanta?
Everybody wants Russell. So I don't know what Washington can possibly offer or your salary cap may allow for a guy like Russell. Matt Ryan is debatable as far as like where he is at, if he's like reached already the pinnacle of his career, how much more he can contribute. And I don't see much of a difference between a Matt Ryan and a Ryan Fitzpatrick at this point, personally, for Washington. So to make a shift, it's kind of like that's a lateral shift at best for a Matt Ryan. Russell is, I think, top of most teams' lists. So if you can land him, of course, like who would say no to Russell?
It'd be great to have Sierra here.
Absolutely.
I think that would be really cool.
I think Sierra is tired of Starbucks coffee and wants the nation's capital where she can, hey, listen, seriously, AJ, they're both influencers, right? They both have outside agendas. What better way to do it than in the nation's capital right there where all the power is? Hey.
Chocolate City. York.
Although it's a little caramel now.
Other markets where maybe the music industry and entertainment industry, there's a crossover there where it's, both of them can thrive. So to your point, Lou, I could see Washington in that regard.
Speaking of cities, before you leave, are there any favorite NFL cities for you?
Ooh, there's some
new stadiums. You got Vegas and LA. And are there any favorites of yours?
I have not been to Vegas yet. I just learned that I will be there Christmas weekend for the Raiders game. So I have to.
Be careful, Vegas. AJ's coming.
Oh, favorite. Well, I'm going to Miami this weekend, and I have to just selfishly say, anytime I get sent to Miami in December, as far as covering NFL games, I'm very happy. But I don't know. For me, stadium conditions don't really, matter as much. I'm standing out there, either way, just doing my laps and putting in the work. So you'd have to ask guys in the box probably who have all the privileges and the space heaters and that good food at halftime. I don't get any of that.
All right. Final words. Just some words of wisdom to some aspiring women who are going into your field.
I would say just be fearless and embrace no's. At different junctures in my career, I've been told no, or, this isn't for you. And as a no can be a blessing in any other facet of your life, if something is not for you, that could very well mean that there's something so much better that is for you. And I appreciate the no's. I appreciate the closed doors, because you're going to end up exactly where you're supposed to be. And hard work will always pay off.
All right. Thank you so much.
What a blessing. What a blessing to have my girl AJ on the tube.
All right. And we'll be watching you the rest of the season, especially when you're in those great stadiums in December and on Christmas, right?
God willing, I stay in the warmer climates throughout December.
Yes. All right. And we'll be wishing we were there. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And we got to get you back again someday.
Sounds great. Thank you again for having me.
All right.
Thanks, AJ.
All the best.
Thank you.
So don't go away, folks. Lou Holder, thank you for being here as well.